I'll fix your fence for free, but with one condition. Tonight I sleep between you both." The fence had always stood quietly between the two houses, old but dependable like a tired guard that had seen many seasons come and go. It was not beautiful, but it did its job. On one side lived Daniel, a man in his early 40s who liked silence, early mornings, and doing things his own way. On the other side lived Mark and his wife Lena, a couple who had moved in 3 years earlier. At first they had been friendly neighbors. They waved, shared small talk, and once even helped each other during a power outage. But over time, small misunderstandings had grown into an invisible wall, stronger than the wooden fence itself. That night, a heavy storm passed through the area. The wind was strong, the rain loud, and thunder shook the ground. By morning, the sky was clear, but the damage was done. A large part of the fence lay broken on the ground, wooden planks scattered like fallen leaves. It was clear that this was not a small problem. The fence that once marked peace and distance between the homes now looked like a symbol of unfinished business. Daniel noticed it first. He stepped outside with his morning coffee and stopped when he saw the damage. His jaw tightened. He already felt annoyed even before understanding how bad it was. To him, the fence was important. It meant privacy. It meant peace. Without it, he felt exposed. Moments later, Mark came out from his side. He was carrying a phone, already talking to someone about work, but he stopped mid-sentence when he saw Daniel standing there. The silence between them felt heavy. Lena appeared behind Mark, her arms crossed, eyes moving from the fence to Daniel and back again. "Well," Mark said finally, ending his call. "Looks like the storm didn't like our fence. Looks like it fell more on your side than mine." Small issues from the past, parking problems, noise complaints, missed greetings, hovered in the air, unspoken but felt. As they stood there, neither willing to give in, a fourth person approached. His footsteps were calm and steady. None of them noticed him at first. He was a man in his late 50s, with weathered hands and a face marked by years of work under open skies. He carried a small tool bag over his shoulder and wore simple clothes, clean but worn. His name was Eli, though they did not know that yet. He had been walking through the neighborhood looking for small jobs, something he often did when passing through new places. Eli stopped a few steps away and looked at the broken fence, then at the people standing on either side. He listened without interrupting. When there was a pause, he cleared his throat gently. "That fence can be fixed," he said calmly. All three turned to look at him, surprised. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" "I was just passing by. Hard not to notice broken things when you've spent your life fixing them. By morning, it'll be standing strong again. Sometimes they just need hands willing to work. First, you should decide if you want the fence fixed at all. Properly is the only way I work." For the first time that morning, she wasn't thinking about blame. Daniel watched closely. He noticed how Eli didn't take sides, didn't blame either household. He only focused on the fence. After a few minutes, Eli stood up. "I'll need to start this evening. Some parts are easier to set overnight." "You mentioned a condition." The argument had stopped, not because it was solved, but because it no longer seemed as important. None of them knew it yet, but the broken fence was only the beginning. The real repair had not even started. By evening, the sky had turned a soft orange, and the heat of the day slowly faded. Daniel stood near his window, watching the street outside. He saw Eli returning with wooden planks tied neatly together, a small box of tools, and a calm walk that made him look like he had all the time in the world. Something about that bothered Daniel. People who were too calm often hid things, he believed. On the other side, Mark and Lena were quietly talking in their kitchen. Lena kept glancing toward the fence through the back window. "I don't know how I feel about this," she said. Mark nodded. "I know, but the fence needs fixing, and he seems harmless." He moved slowly but with purpose, removing broken pieces, placing them aside, measuring carefully. The sound of hammering echoed gently, not loud enough to disturb, but steady enough to remind everyone that something was being built again. Daniel came outside after a while. He leaned against his porch railing, arms crossed. "You sure you don't want help?" he asked, more out of habit than kindness. Eli smiled without looking up. "If I need help, I'll ask. For now, I'm fine." New posts stood firm in the ground, and the broken area no longer looked hopeless. Eli wiped his hands on a cloth and stood up straight. "That's enough for tonight," he said. "The rest will be easier in the morning." Daniel walked over too, standing a little apart but close enough to hear everything. Eli looked at all three of them one by one. His expression didn't change. "Tonight," he said calmly, "I sleep inside the house, between you both." "That's not appropriate. The fence will stay unfinished, and I'll leave." "But he hasn't done anything wrong." She looked back at him. Both of them felt uncomfortable but also curious. The argument that morning had reminded them how tired they were of tension, and this man, odd as his request was, didn't feel dangerous. Daniel finally spoke. "One night, doors stay open, no secrets." A simple mat was placed on the floor. Eli set his bag beside it and sat down calmly. The three homeowners sat nearby, not too close, not too far. The air felt thick, as if everyone was waiting for something to happen. Minutes passed in silence. Then Eli spoke. "Why does this fence matter so much to you?" "It keeps my life separate. It's about fixing the space between people." Somewhere outside, a dog barked once and then stopped. Eli sat calmly on the mat between the two living spaces, his back straight, his hands resting loosely on his knees. He did not look like someone waiting to speak. He looked like someone waiting to listen. Daniel sat on one side, stiff and alert, his arms folded tightly. Mark and Lena sat together on the other side, close but not touching, as if unsure whether comfort was allowed in this strange moment. No one knew how long the night would feel. No one knew what was expected of them. Eli broke the silence softly. "Sometimes," he said, "silence tells more truth than words, but silence can also hide things. Tonight, either choice is fine. You talk like this is some kind of lesson. We just wanted peace." No one spoke. The night moved forward slowly, as if giving them time to decide whether they wanted to keep holding their silence or let it go. Mark finally spoke. "When we moved here," he said, "we thought starting fresh would be easy. New place, new people, but it was. Every time we tried to be friendly, it felt like we were bothering you, Daniel. So we stopped trying. I used to wave every morning. After a while, it felt pointless. I lost my wife 5 years ago. Control feels safe when loss takes something from you. Pain doesn't disappear when it's hidden. It just waits." At some point, Mark stood and poured water into glasses, handing one to each person, including Eli. The simple act felt meaningful, like a quiet agreement that this space mattered. Eli accepted the glass with a small nod. "Thank you. Because once, someone did it for me." Outside, the unfinished fence stood quietly under the stars. Inside, the space between the neighbors felt different, not fixed, not perfect, but open. As the night slowly leaned toward morning, no one noticed when the tension finally left the room. It slipped away quietly, like a breath released after being held for too long. Morning light entered the house slowly, gentle and quiet, as if it did not want to disturb what had happened during the night. The clock still ticked on the wall, but now it sounded softer. The air felt lighter, like something heavy had been lifted without anyone noticing the exact moment it happened. Daniel was the first to wake fully. He had not slept deeply, but he felt rested in a way he had not felt for years. He sat up slowly, listening. No voices, no tension, just calm. He glanced toward the space between the rooms where Eli had been sitting. The mat was still there, neatly placed. Eli himself was sitting quietly, already awake, his eyes open, his posture relaxed. "You didn't sleep," Daniel said quietly. Eli smiled faintly. "I rested enough." It did not erase the past, but it softened its sharp edges. Eli stood up and folded the mat carefully. "I'll finish the fence now." The half-fixed fence waited silently, wooden posts standing like patient witnesses. Eli handed tools without instruction. He didn't need to explain much. The three men worked together naturally, measuring, holding, securing. Their movements were careful, unhurried. Lena watched from the porch for a moment, then brought out water and simple food. She set it down quietly, not wanting to interrupt the calm rhythm. As they worked, Daniel noticed how solid the fence was becoming, stronger than before, better aligned, built with care, not frustration. "This fence will last," Daniel said. Eli nodded. "Because it's not rushed." Funny how a broken thing brought us here. Something quieter, something closer to peace. Eli packed his tools slowly. "I should be going." Then Mark asked, "Will we see you again?" It felt like a boundary that made sense. Later that afternoon, Daniel sat on his porch with a cup of tea. Mark and Lena were outside too, tending to their garden. Mark looked up. "Dinner sometime?" he asked. Daniel thought for a moment, then smiled. "That would be fine." The silence between the houses was no longer heavy. It was comfortable. And though the man who brought them together was gone, the space he changed remained, quiet, open, and finally at rest. Days passed after Eli left, but his presence did not fade. It lingered quietly, like the warmth of sunlight that remains even after a cloud moves away. The fence stood firm between the two houses, straight and strong, its fresh wood still pale against the older boards. Yet it no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a line drawn with care, one that respected space without creating distance. Daniel noticed the change first in the mornings. He still woke early, still enjoyed the quiet hours before the day fully began. But now, when he stepped outside with his cup of tea, the silence did not feel heavy. It felt open. Sometimes he heard Mark moving on the other side, watering plants or adjusting tools. The sounds no longer bothered him. They felt normal, almost comforting. One morning, Daniel caught himself waiting for something small, and then it happened. Mark looked up from his garden and nodded. "Morning," Mark said. "Morning," Daniel replied. It was a simple exchange, nothing special. But Daniel stood there for a moment longer than usual, surprised by how easy it felt. Lena noticed changes too. She no longer felt the need to keep her curtains closed during the day. Sunlight filled the house more freely now. She found herself humming while cooking, something she hadn't done in a long time. The tension she used to carry in her shoulders slowly loosened. One afternoon she baked bread. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and inviting. Without thinking too much about it, she wrapped a loaf and walked next door. Daniel opened the door, clearly surprised. "I made too much," Lena said, holding out the bread. "Thought you might like some." He and Daniel exchanged small favors without making a big deal of them. A borrowed ladder, a shared tool, a quick question about the weather. Each interaction added another thin thread of connection. One evening, as promised, they shared dinner. It wasn't fancy, just simple food, eaten at a table that felt slightly too small for the moment. There were pauses in conversation, but they weren't uncomfortable. They talked about work, about small plans, about the neighborhood. No one brought up the past directly, but it was there, resting quietly, no longer sharp. At one point, Daniel looked around the table and felt something he hadn't felt in years: belonging, not loud or overwhelming, just present. "I didn't think things could change like this," Daniel said softly. Lena nodded. "Neither did we." When silence appeared, it no longer felt empty. Sometimes Daniel thought about Eli. He wondered where he was, what fences he was fixing, what spaces he was helping open. He realized that Eli had never asked them to change. He had simply given them a place to stop, to listen, to see each other clearly. One evening, a storm passed through again. The wind was strong, the rain loud. Daniel found himself watching the fence from his window. It didn't move. It held firm. The next morning, Mark was already outside, checking for damage. "Looks like it held up," Mark said. Daniel nodded. It did. Of what happens when people choose to face things instead of turning away. Life didn't become perfect. There were still quiet days. There were still moments of misunderstanding. But now there was space to talk, space to listen, space to pause. One afternoon, Daniel sat on his porch as the sun set. The light painted the fence in warm colors, soft and calm. He thought about how much he had changed, not by forcing himself, but by allowing space for others. He whispered quietly, more to himself than anyone else, "Thank you."